afternoon, Carl.
Michael Kitces, how are you? Hey, I heard we're gonna do a speaking engagement together, and it's kind of a secret, but she told me this person who's running the speaking engagement told me that she's getting a blue couch. I know.
I'm
Don't
so
Let's not talk
excited.
anymore about it. People are sick of hearing about the blue couch. So anyway, I'm doing
No,
great.
you can never
I'm
be
doing
sick
great.
of hearing about the blue. Look, we did the blue couch so much that now, like years later, people are setting up speaking engagements for us with the blue couch.
That's right.
Are we allowed to say what and where this is going to be? Because I know now, like
Hmm.
we've just piqued some people's curiosity, and I truly don't know if we're allowed to say what the thing is.
I think maybe we should just say it's an FPA chapter in the East for right
Okay,
now. Maybe we'll announce it later.
okay, and they're gonna have
Yeah.
a blue couch. I'm very excited
They're gonna
about.
have a blue couch. Yeah. Super fun. So
I'm
anyway,
I'm very
doing
excited
well.
about this
Yeah.
because it has been absent from your background for too
I
long.
know. It's going to make an appearance tomorrow at the retreat we have at our house. So it's still making its way around.
All right, I'm glad to hear it's doing well.
Because the blue couch, interestingly enough, the blue couch started saying no. Started
To
saying
what?
no
Like it's
to
travel engagements?
yeah, it's travel engagements. Started saying no, I'm really comfortable here in the house.
I
So the blue couch had to develop the ability to say no.
I have to admit I'm pretty sure you want to do a theme around having to say no because last week's episode was about how to say yes, but like I feel like this might be more of your wife who bought the couch saying no, but let's go with the couch is saying
Said
no.
no.
For
So
the
I think that would be actually speaking of saying no, we should talk about that today because I was just thinking about our theme of last week or last month, last two
yeah,
weeks ago,
I
last episode. Let's talk about it.
yeah, I it's funny to me even as I reflect back on the last episode, right? It was look, no one likes saying no, and it's yucky and it feels negative. And I know I've gotten my share of feedback of look, all the research and that stuff we put out at the end of the day, like serving clients below your minimum creates business problems later, and we need to practice how to say no, and that feels really sucky and negative. So we did a whole discussion last week of like how to at least say yes in a way that just is sustainable and doesn't create problems for your business. And sometimes we really just should be saying no. Uh which I guess really is that's not even just a clients who don't fit my minimums thing, although that happened to be the theme of the week last week, right? There's lots of places that word could come up more than it probably does. Community commitments and family things and PTA things and all the different ways
Endless.
that it gets ludicrously difficult for most of us to say no.
Yeah, yeah. Look, I think this is a fun discussion because if we keep in mind of like why do we want to be better at saying no, is often we hear from these amazing people called financial advisors, financial planners, who have big things they want to do, an impact they want to make in the world. And one of the things they say, one of the things we all say gets in the way is I'm too busy. And so then that's kind of to me, this is the why behind this discussion is like, okay, if I'm too busy to do some of the things that are really important to me at work and at home and for my health and for my sleep, like you just as soon as you start listing it, you're just like, okay, well then I need to be better at having the ability to say no to things that don't fit.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that's been one piece of framing that's been really helpful for me, and I think I first heard this from Jason Fried at Base Camp. He said, I think it was from him. He said that no, no, or yes is like a blunt instrument. I think he compared it to a shotgun. Like every time you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to a whole bunch of things. You just don't know what they are. Right? By saying yes to that one thing, you are automatically saying no to something else. You just don't know what it is quite yet.
Well,
And
yes, but to me that's the point of the problem. Like saying no to the person standing in front of me is freaking awkward. Having it turn out that I don't have capacity later is future Michael problems.
that's exactly right. So saying yes though, saying yes is this blunt instrument. Saying no is a precision instrument, right? I'm just saying no to the one thing. If I say yes, I'm saying no to a bunch of things, but I don't know what they are. If I say no to one thing, I'm just saying no to that one thing. So I love that framing And your comment's really smart too. Like the idea that saying no right now is painful. I don't know what I'm going to be saying no to later. If I just say yes to this, it's fine, you know. But I've had this come up so many times where I'm like, darn it, I said yes to that thing, and now something really important
Oh
has
yeah,
come
I
up.
mean, I think we've all had those scenarios. And then something comes along, you're like, oh God, I really want to do this, and like I can't because I'm really, really, really too busy because of the list of things that I said yes to in the past. Uh, and I say like, darn it, I shouldn't do that to myself. I'm gonna get better about saying no from now on. And then next Tuesday, I'm like, oh God, I just did it again.
Yeah.
I said yes to something again. Ugh.
Well, you know what I think would be fun? Like, let's just pretend like you've already gotten clear about what your big yes is. Here's my priority. So we've already gotten clear. And now I need to create space by saying no to more things. And let's just like tactically almost, let's talk about how to say no. So, like, I'm not just, to be honest, I think we've covered how to say no to clients or prospective clients that aren't a good fit. That's kind of, I think we've covered that. I would be more interested in how do I say no to things that will put me in this position where I can't devote the time to the things that really matter. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So how do you think about that? And have you seen any ways of saying no that you're like, that's really amazing?
So the path and process for me around this, I guess I can't entirely separate this from the comment you made earlier around just like what are the things that you're saying yes to that become the trigger point. So I realize the way I think about this is in terms of filters, right? Just like
Mm,
opportunities come, right? Sometimes good opportunities, sometimes not really my ideal opportunities. That can be business opportunities, that can be life opportunities, that can be chip in for the family or the community or the school or whatever opportunities. I'm using opportunities very loosely here, right? There's lots of opportunities, way more than I can possibly say yes to. And so I realize at least works for me. I needed some kind of filter or series of filters
mhm.
that became my rule set, as
Hmm.
it were. And I realized that this sort of evolved two ways. So part of it was just getting clear on what the filters are. So, very practically, like I had a filter, I'll pull it back to the business side for a moment. Like I had a filter for the minimum client engagement that I would accept.
Hmm.
If it doesn't get to this number, it just doesn't work for me in the business. And so I need to have that number as a filter. If you can't at least meet this financial number, it just doesn't work. And as the business evolved and grew, that threshold moved up over time. And so there was a financial metric. For some others, it's a time energy metric kind of thing.
Hmm. Hmm.
I just really don't enjoy doing that, and it takes away, like sucks my soul away. So I'm just not going to do that anymore. I'm going to hire someone to do it if it's a thing I can delegate, or I'm just going to say no because I just really don't enjoy doing that and the way I feel after I do the thing. So
Hold on to that one for a minute. Let me tell
sure.
you a quick story because I think that's really interesting. I have a really good friend who's a really well-known author. He sold millions of copies of his books. And I asked him to come on like a podcast with me.
Okay.
And he said, and it took him a while to reply. And I was sort of like, this is interesting. He finally replied. He's like, can I? And the email was sort of dripping with angst. You know, he was like, can I just be really honest with you? He's like,
So that means no.
yeah, he was like, I don't like he's like, I don't like being on Zoom calls. And I don't like setting up the camera and I don't like sitting there and I don't like the pressure of people listening. He's like, I'm gonna come on and what am I gonna sell? Like, he's like, what am I gonna sell? 7 books and I keep $3 a book. It's $21. He's like, can you know what I love is talking to you. He's like, could we, his language, could we just get together for a beer and have a conversation? I like that. And I thought that was super interesting from what you're pointing to, like an energy thing. Like I don't really like doing it. And and here it's, this is another interesting angle because sometimes we feel like we should do certain things for exposure, like any of us, like come
Yep.
speak to the Kiwanis Club,
Yep.
or come speak to the Chamber of Commerce, and we feel like, boy, we got to accept any exposure we can get. I sort of enjoyed years ago starting telling people like, exposure can kill you. Like, or I'm overexposed. Like, I don't need any more exposure. But I think it's interesting to think about, like, it turns out just because somebody's offering you something really nice that will lead to possibly maybe something doesn't mean you have to do something that you don't enjoy. So back to your sort of energy thing, or like, I don't like doing that.
But the second thing that I found that comes with, like, first it was creating the filters just to get clear,
Mm,
right? Like I need $3,000 per client or my business just isn't going to work.
hmm
The second thing, so like first it was just sort of a clarity moment for me, like, okay, really, like where do I have to draw this line of where I'm going to say yes and where I'm going to say no? The trick I found next that at least as for how this worked and played out for me, the next thing that happened was that when someone would ask to work with me, I would say like, well, we have a minimum fee of $3,000. Uh, just that's what we've determined at the firm is necessary in order to be able to do our best work with clients. I would essentially blame like this is where the firm set the minimum. And
mm
the funny thing at the time was that I controlled that business and where the minimums were. So it's like the firm says I can't do this because the minimum has to be $3,000. Like, it's your firm. Like, you could make that number any number that you want. But for some weird reason, like, when I could blame the firm, even if the firm was me, like, when I could blame the firm, it's like, look, this isn't personal. I'm not rejecting you personally. Like, just like, this is a, right. I hate to say it firmly. This isn't personal. It's business. Just like, the business needs to be able to do this, and so I'm not able to make exceptions because it's not viable for the business. And I found
mm.
this weird effect where I could blame that this is what the business needs, and it made it feel like it was less about me in a way that was comfortable, which I then amplified down to, well, the other thing better than that is, well, then I'm just going to put the minimums on my website and just be really clear about them. And frankly, that was the biggest shift to me because once I put the minimums on the website, people that didn't want to pay that much stopped calling.
Yeah.
And then I didn't have to say no very much because they filtered themselves out. And then I found a few started coming through anyways. So we actually added a field to the intake form that says something in fact like I can't remember exactly what the wording was, but I acknowledge and am comfortable with the fee minimum that is stated on the website. And they had to
Yeah.
check that
Right.
to go through the intake process to schedule an intro meeting. So like I made them explicitly acknowledge that they were comfortable with the minimums so that I could further filter out who was getting in front of me. That in essence I found the easiest way to not balk in the moment of saying no is to not put myself in a position where I need to say no.
Yeah. How do you apply that to other areas? So let's think about other, and I'm actually quite curious about, I stumbled upon this because this idea of the no club. There's a great book
The no
called,
club.
yeah, called The No Club, and it's the subtitle is putting a stop to women's dead end work.
Okay.
And I'm sort of curious about this idea of um the non-promotable work, right?
Oh,
And our need to take on tasks that go unrewarded. And so, like, I'm curious about this in the setting of a firm. I'm curious about this in the setting of like the really good things we get asked to do in our community. We could go all the way to like PTA club, soccer coach. We could go to like pro bono financial planning work. Like away from clients, but how do we say? So I first got introduced to the No Club because, again, I asked somebody to be a guest on something I was doing, and nobody had ever said no. In 3 years, we did it every month. Nobody had ever said no. And I actually asked for permission to share this story, but I still feel like I want to protect the person who it's a really prominent professor at an Ivy League school. I
Okay.
asked and she said no. And I said, "You're the first person who's ever said no. I'm a big fan of your work. Count me as an even bigger fan." Like, can I just ask you some questions about saying no? And she said, "Yeah, I'm part of a no club." She said, I have to be very disciplined about what I say yes to, and I'm glad I impressed you with my no. I have a no club that's really helped me hone the skill.
Now I
So,
want to know, how did she reject you in the first place?
well, here's what she said in the
That
first
you were
place. I
like
actually,
curiosity was piqued and you appreciated the dignified no, that you like her more because of it.
yeah, and keep in mind, like I've saved this email. This was so impressive to me, and I've got another example from how Brene Brown said no. So this professor,
I just find out. I love that most of us struggle with rejection and you literally collect the
I
rejections.
know I'm a huge fan of these rejections. So this professor got introduced by another very prominent professor. And the other very prominent professor was like, "Hey, I just had this conversation in the car. You guys would love it." It was like all
Okay.
good. And I was like, "Great, let's do it." And then she said, "It's lovely to meet you. Thank you for the message. I'm deeply absorbed in running my research center at insert university these days, and I do a very limited number of outside engagements. If you would like to meet my speaker's agent, here's their address. You can talk to them about availability and rates. Best signed." Like there was no opening. And that's when I was like, I love this reply. You're officially the first person who's ever said no. This is incredible. Can I ask you some more questions about it? And then that led me to some of the research that was done by some of her colleagues or friends and pointing to this being a particularly challenging problem, un unrewarded or uncompensated work, and it being a particularly challenging problem with women. But it led me to this idea of like, how have you had to say no to things that are good, right? How have you learned to say no to, can you speak at this event? Can you help with the PTA project? Can you like, how do you say no?
So, just very practical, like the way it's evolved for me, I have gotten clearer and clearer over time about what my capacity is. My capacity for just sort of like working hours and how many hours of stuff I can do between worky work and volunteer work and some nonprofit boards that I'm involved with and other organizations. Uh, I've gotten really clear about my capacity, mostly through a span of multiple years of misjudging the capacity and experiencing the
Right,
pain and
right,
then
right,
going
right,
like, okay, well, that was clearly too much.
right.
We need to rein that in and adjust. But, a few years of that and some self-reflection on that, I've gotten really clear where my capacity is. And so the language that's really evolved for me is simply to say, like, thank you so much for the opportunity, but I don't have capacity to do that, to support on that, to be involved in that right now, like whatever the
Right.
contextually appropriate language is.
Nothing,
But
no justification, no long email,
yeah,
just no,
I'm
I
sorry,
can't
I
do it.
just don't have capacity to take that on right now. And because I still typically feel some moral obligation to those in need, I will usually at least try to say like, and here's somewhere else you can go, and here's another resource. Like if I have an easy way to say like, I'm sorry I don't have capacity, and here's someone else who might be able to help, I'll at least keep you moving along on your journey
Yeah.
as best I can. Um,
Yeah.
I think I mostly do that to assuage my own guilt, but I want to be helpful. I'm sort of
Sure.
wired
And,
that way.
either way,
Uh,
it's okay to do it either way, right? If it's just to get rid
yeah,
of your own guilt, that's fine, but it's still helpful.
but I don't have capacity to do that, to take that on, whatever the thing is, has become a go-to language for me that I guess I could have said that at any point along the way, but I've gotten such clarity on where my capacity is. I'm like, it's very authentic. Like it feels authentic to me. I'm not just saying this is a blow off. I'm like, no, really, of all the things I'm doing, I just don't have capacity to do that, to take that on. Here's
Yeah.
someone else you might talk to instead.
No, I love that. I love that. And
And
I'm just go ahead.
well, sorry, I was just going to add. I mean, in the spirit of what you commented on the rejection from the professor, like I've never had negative pushback or
Right.
blowback
Right.
on that. Like it's the fascinating thing. I mean, even for the one you read, what was it like? I'm deeply absorbed in my research or something to that.
My running the research center at the university. Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, it's funny to me. I've seen a few or like experienced a few sort of rejection declines like that over time. I'm so sorry, but my priorities right now are, my work and my son's senior year of high school. I really don't have room to do anything else right now because I'm focusing on those things. And I've known a few people that have sent forth rejections like that, and every single time to a T, like the response is almost always something to the effect of, well, damn, someday I hope I have my stuff figured out as well as that person does. Like
Yeah,
they
yeah.
got their
Like
priorities clear. I'm a walking
admiration.
hot
Yeah.
mess all the time. Like,
Yep.
right, not the fear version that we have. Oh my gosh, if I say that, like they're going to be angry, they're going to be pissed off, they're going to be
Yep.
upset about their
Yep.
rejection. I'm like, no, every time I've been on the other end of one of those rejections, I'm like, I just respect them more and go, wow, I hope someday I can articulate my priorities clearly enough to be as good at just saying, I'm sorry, these are my priorities and you don't fit it. Moving on.
Yeah. No, I agree. I first started thinking about this probably, it was probably like 27 years ago when I had this experience with my neighbor who was an emergency room doctor. And he was also like the teacher of the year at the med school, and everybody loved him. And so they kept asking him to do more and more stuff. And his wife finally bought a bunch of 3x5 cards, index cards, and she just wrote no on every one of them and kept a stack next to his laundry. And every morning she would slide that into his scrubs as he would get dressed to go to work. And she would make him practice. He's
Yeah.
like, if anybody asks you to do anything, just pull the card out, look at it, shrug your shoulders, and go and read it out loud. You just say no. So I think find, because again, why do we care about this? People who are, if you're building a business, you've built a business, you're running into capacity issues at any level, getting laser focused on what really matters to you and what will drive the results that you're after, whatever those are. If the results are growth, that's fine. If the results are more time, whatever those results are, if you're clear about those results, then the next step is I've got to learn how to say no. I got to learn how to say no to anything that doesn't
Yeah.
align with those results. And I think we get so much angst around, like I finally wrote a template email that said, and I stole this from Brene Brown. It said, one of the things I love about my work is that I get to hear from so many people, so many readers.
Hmm.
One of the things that drives me crazy about my work is I simply can't respond to every single one of them. Right. So
Oh,
thank you
oh,
so
that's
much.
beautiful.
Well, because it's true. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it kills me that like I get asked to read a probably a 2 or 3 books a week in email, and it kills
Yeah.
me. And part of it kills me because it's like I want to read those books. But if I
Yeah.
did that, I would never get to do my own work, let alone sleep, let alone
Yep.
see my kid. So I've played with different versions of it. Like if I say yes to every single one of these things that comes in, I have to say no to my kids. That felt a little too guilt trippy. So I just designed this idea of like, and so I would be thinking if I was an advisor and I got asked to do something outside of my laser focus area of opportunity, I would just say like you, like either A, I don't have capacity, or that's just a little tangential, or it's just a little outside of what I'm focused on right now. In fact, here are 2 or 3 people. The other thing I would do, I was just thinking as you were talking, I would open my Chat GPT account. I'd start a project right now called the No Project. And every single time I had to say no, I'd go into the No Project, talk it through, and say, help me write an email until I
Ooh.
refined. So I don't have to think about this is a classic cold start problem, right? Like
Yeah,
saying no
how do
is
I start putting the language down in this email to make it gracious and not awkward?
yeah, and it's emotional. You got to get
Yep.
all in your feelings. If you can just go into chat and go, hey, I'm all in my feelings. Feel deeply about this person. I really want to help. It kills me that I have to say no, but I have to say no. Can you look at all the other times we've said no inside this project? Write me a short, sweet email saying no to this person. And in fact, give them two or three suggestions on where they could look for help for this particular
Hmm.
request. I would do that all day long.
Interesting. The other thing I would note as a thread to this conversation, I don't know how much this generalizes to others, but the other thing I'm struck by with your professor example was, she opened the door to possibility, right? It was like I do accept a few engagements a year, and here's my speakers bureau person, right? So it's like I do accept a few things a year, but I'm not going to be the one that says yes or no. Or I'm assuming behind the scenes she still decides what she's taking with her speakers bureau, but just she created a situation where even if the answer is going to end up being no, she won't have to say it.
Well, yeah, and I think this is
Someone else will say it. The speakers bureau will say, "I'm so sorry, Miss So and So is not available for your
yeah.
engagement." And I will admit, like I've seen a power of this as I when I got to the point that I hired an executive assistant and put them in my inbox to help manage emails, including like a lot of things that I get requested on of in various ways that I know all the people and I have the relationships, which makes it so much harder to say no to people about things, even when I've got good reasons, and they would probably be fine with the no. I still feel bad for all the various relationshipy reasons. Um, she doesn't have that history with those folks, so she
No,
doesn't get caught up in the same emotions that I do. I mean, she's lovely and a very personal person, but she just there's baggage that we have in saying no to someone that other people saying no on our behalf don't have, and it becomes much easier for them to say no than for me to say no. And so that doesn't work in a lot of situations. I can't always like insert someone from the workplace into my personal situations. I would also like to say no to, but that principle of just if you are your own worst enemy about not saying no, can you put some barriers in place so that you don't set yourself up to have that problem in the first place? So I
totally.
put minimums all over the place on everything with a lot of prominence, so I don't put myself in a position where I need to say no and then
Yeah.
compromise my own filters or thresholds. I've tried to put team members in places to help filter things where I can guide them. Here's what I want to say yes to and what I want to say no to. Now, please help me do that because I'm going to
Right.
compromise myself if I put myself in the position.
No, I think
And just it helps.
totally. I like tactically that's we could just call that outsource the no, right? Like
Yeah.
and you see this with like orthodontist. My orthodontist was a friend of mine. I rode bikes with him. I went to the office. I did the initial interview, the initial whatever exam. He came by for 3 minutes, double checked everything in the initial exam. Then I got whisked away to a room where pricing came up. Guess who wasn't there? Right?
Uh-huh.
My friend, the orthodontist. And so I asked because I'm curious about these sorts of things. I'm like, where is Jeff and why isn't he here? And they said, well, the reason he's not here is because everyone knows Jeff and everyone wants a Jeff discount. Like if Jeff were here, he would do this for free for everybody because that's, like so it's this is not unusual to put something
And
between
there's even kind
you
of a
and
like,
no.
no, I actually sort of respect Jeff because that's a good point. And he is such a nice guy. He probably would blow up his whole business doing it for free for everyone. Good for Jeff.
Good for
Good for
Jeff. That's
Jeff.
right. Be like Jeff. And the other thing I loved about this professor's email was what she really was doing is taking uncompensated, unrewarded work and saying, hey, if you want this, here's my availability and rates. And I think it's very interesting to think through as a junior advisor, as an associate advisor, as somebody working in admin or office management in any of these firms, just thinking carefully through, like, how do you navigate saying no if it's not part of your job, but you also want to be a good team player. Like that's where this stuff gets really challenging. Like saying no, putting minimums up, that's hard. But how do you navigate saying no? And I'm thinking of some of the conversations I've had recently, mainly here, like retreats here at the house, where it's actually not part of someone's job to do some things they were being asked to do. And here in this professor's email, and I have to think like every word of this was very carefully done. I'm super focused on this thing that's really important. If you would like this other thing, reach out here, and here's my rates and availability. So how would you see it applying to somebody who is being asked to do things and not by their boss, because that's a different discussion, but somebody who's being asked to do things that's not really their jobs? Like how would this change? How would you go
I
about it?
guess I I'm struggling tiny with this only because I like it. A lot of it still depends on who's on the other side of the conversation and
True.
whether or what power dynamics are kind of underway, right?
Yeah.
Coworker is different than senior coworker is potentially different than boss.
Okay. Let me clear it up because I'm super curious about this. Let's pretend like it actually is your boss. And they've given you a very clear set of strategic initiatives and maybe even KPIs that they're measuring you against. And you know what you need to do to get this. And they keep asking you to do stuff that's outside of that. It doesn't measure against this. What do you think about that conversation?
I mean, like I come back to, I mean, just reflecting that back to them.
Love that.
Joe, you've told me that it's a priority to do, to get the financial plans prepped and shipped, and that it's really important that we get through two a week or three a week or whatever the number is. But I'm already spending all of my time doing that. So when you ask me to do this other thing, I don't have time in my schedule. The only thing that can give is that I don't do one of the plans that you told me was really important to do. So I
Love
feel
that.
like I have conflicted directions from you,
Yeah.
and I just need you to resort what's really priority for me here.
Yeah.
Like, do you want me to keep doing the three plans a week you said you want, or do you want me to do two plans a week and the other thing? Because I'm putting in the hours and working the full time, and it just doesn't all fit.
Love that.
So
Yeah, that's
you
exactly where I
tell
would have
me
gone.
it's your, it's your firm, Mr. or Mrs. Boss. Like it's your call. Just you tell me how to prioritize the things with the limited time that I've got, and I will do those things. But I don't know how to pick the ones that are in conflict of each other. So I need you to tell me which one's really the priority.
Yeah, love that. And I think mostly back to your original comment that anytime you get an email from somebody like this, you actually are like, go Jeff. I think a reasonable supervisor or boss, and reasonable in giant asterisks and quotes, right? Like a reasonable supervisor and boss respects that, right? Understands like, oh, I didn't realize I was putting you in that position. And then has, especially if somebody comes to you with that challenge and has proposed solutions, like I can either do this or this, what would you like me to do? And you're now in a position of strategy and creativity rather than just saying no and fighting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love
I
that.
To me, the question comes out just as we come towards the end. For folks that are listening, just what you have to do it my way, but I just the my approach to these, like what are your filters?
Mm,
Right? I need to generate this much revenue per client. I will only sit on one nonprofit board at a time. So
Hmm.
when the second and third and the fourth come because the community wants community things, like I'm so sorry, I have capacity for one nonprofit board at any particular time, but I'm already on such and such, and I just don't have capacity uh to add another one. I'll let you know if I drop the other one and create some capacity for myself. So, I only do two things for exposure in the community every month. So I'm sorry I can't do the Chamber of Commerce because I already did the Kiwanis Club and Rotary this month. Uh, right, whatever it is, like what are your filters? Where is your capacity for the things that you get asked? Because if you can create clarity and then just be able to say, I'm sorry, my capacity is blank and I'm already at that capacity, right? My capacity is I can't do my research and the other speaking things at the same time. I'm deeply absorbed in my running my research center. Please go here. It gets a lot easier to filter when you're really clear on where your capacity limits are. And the powerful thing, I know, like the takeaway I hope folks have from this, when you can get clear about what your filters are and articulate them to someone else, we get worried that they're going to be upset we said no. And my experience almost universally is everyone else just goes, wow, I wish I had as much clarity about my priorities as that person does.
Totally. No, I love that. And again, we end up at the same place that these are often the biggest problem with any of these things we're addressing is in our own heads. It turns out if you just speak clearly and kindly, right? Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it
Yeah,
kind? Right? If I can speak true, directly, kindly, um,
it tends to go okay.
it tends to be just fine. And if it doesn't, right, like we can live with that because we can't keep doing
Yeah,
too much all the time. Cheers, Michael. That was super fun.
awesome. Thank you, Carl.
Thanks.